This is based on a real story. The clock on the wall ticked with a rhythmic, metallic precision that grated against the silence. It was 3:14 a.m. The apartment was a tomb of shadows, the only light emanating from the pale, flickering screen of his phone. He sat motionless, staring at the blank wall, his mind replaying the events of the last few hours. The air in the room felt heavy. He did not blink. He did not shift his weight. He simply watched the seconds crawl by, each tick of the clock echoing. Then the sound cut through the stillness. 3 taps, precise, measured, controlled. He held his breath. He gripped the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. Then the taps came again. 3 more strikes. They were not the frantic pounding of a panicked neighbor. He stood, his joints popping, and crept toward the entrance. He pressed his ear against the cold metal, listening for a breath. There was nothing, only the oppressive weight of the dark hallway. He pressed his ear harder against the cold metal, his pulse drumming against his eardrum. He expected a demand, a threat, or perhaps the heavy silence of a prank. Instead, a whisper drifted through the gap, thin as a razor blade. Open. The sound hit him like a physical blow. It was his own voice. The exact pitch, the same slight rasp he had developed from years of smoking. He pulled back as if burned, his breath catching in his throat. He stared at the polished brass handle, seeking some logical explanation, some trick of the acoustics. In the dim light, his own reflection stared back from the curved surface. But the reflection's eyes were wider, its mouth curling into a slow, jagged grin, while his own face remained frozen in absolute terror. He scrambled backward, his heel catching on the rug, and he fell hard against the floorboards. The reflection did not fall. It remained fixed in the brass, watching him with that same predatory, impossible smile. He clawed at the floor, pushing himself away from the door, his hands trembling violently. The silence in the room had shifted, turning from a heavy weight into a sharp, jagged edge. He scrambled toward the table, his phone buzzing violently against the wood. He snatched it up, his thumb trembling as he swiped the screen. A message from an unknown number glowed in the dark. "I told you not to come home." His breath hitched. He had spent the night hiding, terrified of the very place he now stood. A second message blinked onto the screen. "You weren't the one who listened." He felt a cold draft snake across the floorboards, chilling the sweat on his skin. The final message arrived. "Now it is." He spun around, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The door handle was turning. It rotated with a slow, deliberate screech of metal on metal. The lock clicked open. He backed into the corner, his eyes fixed on the widening gap. The air in the room grew thin, charged with the static of an approaching storm. He pressed his shoulders into the wall, trying to shrink away from the threshold. The handle continued its agonizing rotation, the sound of grinding steel filling the void. He watched, paralyzed, as the barrier finally gave way. The door swung inward, heavy and slow, revealing only the empty, pitch-black hallway. He held his breath, his eyes straining against the gloom. But as he looked down at the threshold, he saw a pair of shoes standing there. His own shoes, worn and scuffed at the heels. A hand reached out from the darkness, gripping the edge of the door frame. It was his hand, complete with the jagged white scar across the thumb he had earned as a child. The figure stepped into the light. It moved with his gait, held its head at his angle, and wore his face with terrifying precision. The intruder did not speak. It simply stood there, bathed in the pale glow of the room, its expression shifting into a look of predatory triumph. The protagonist tried to scream, but his throat locked. He tried to move, but his legs refused to obey. He stood frozen in the corner, watching his own life being claimed by the thing that had finally come home. The figure advanced. Each step matched the rhythm of the ticking clock. The protagonist pressed his palms against the wall, his nails digging into the plaster, but his body remained unresponsive. The intruder reached out, placing a hand on the protagonist's chest. The touch was cold, devoid of pulse, yet it carried the weight of absolute ownership. The intruder leaned in, whispering into the protagonist's ear with a voice that was his own, yet hollowed out. The protagonist felt his memories slipping, his sense of self dissolving like ink in water. The intruder simply stepped into his space, merging with his frame. The intruder turned toward the mirror, adjusting its posture, while the protagonist faded into the shadows.